Hey guys, welcome to Crypto with Pav, where we're going to talk about where the markets have been this week so far, where I think they're going to go. It's gearing up to be a pretty exciting week, to be honest. We spoke about a potential bullish thesis for the altcoin market probably started last month, and since then there's been a bit of indecision across the market, I guess you could say. But I think there's a few things I'm going to share today that kind of really solidify this idea that there's more, I guess, bullish tailwinds behind the idea of an altcoin shift to the upside. But it comes with a certain caveat, and that is that any sort of trepidation on Bitcoin's front, we could start to see things potentially get a bit crazy and silly and elated and then potentially fall away. So I guess what's key in this episode for me, I'm going to talk through, I guess, why I think altcoins are looking quite good and at what point do they not look so good. And a lot of it comes down to Bitcoin and I think the ETF flows. So, we've done a good job covering the ETF flows, so far. So I think we'll keep up that trend as well. And then to round up just everything, we'll probably spend a little bit more time just diving into some altcoins, doing some analysis. There's been a lot of things popping off and running. I'm sure most people out there are feeling FOMO. So just want to identify, I guess, a few key areas that I'll be watching. So you do your own research as well, obviously. But so I guess it always doesn't hurt to get another take on things at the moment in the market. But let's get stuck straight in, just so we don't waste any time at all. But with Bitcoin, we cracked through this key Fibonacci level 2 weeks ago. This week finished very, very strong. Pretty key close above these prior highs from 2021. So we're trading at pretty much highs that we haven't seen in the last 2 years. But I guess what's funny, for me, is we're still not seeing much interest from Bitcoin, which is a bit weird. You look at things like Google search volumes. I'm sure everyone's seen those images floating around Twitter lately. Still all-time lows. So sentiment still really isn't where it was, and that could be a lot of things, right? A lot of range of factors. It might be the fact that last cycle we just did see, I guess, a lot more people come into the market, get stuck at the top, really demoralized. Things like FTX, Binance, all the other jazz in between, Terra crash. It might just take a little bit longer for everyone to feel a bit more comfortable with crypto again. That could be simply it. But, it's not been a bad time. 441 days technically of just going up and to the right. Not too upset about that. But I guess what matters now is we can sort of look at, underlying conditions right now in the market to sort of see, is this trend likely to be sustained? Why not? So starting with Bitcoin firstly, for me, with the close that we just had, we made a pretty solid high. So at least speaking on a weekly time frame, for me it's still setting up more so bullish than bearish, just looking at market structure. We're also sitting quite nicely in this fair value gap monthly level. So that's essentially just the price inefficiency that exists here on a monthly time frame. So the fact that we're still hanging around in here, we haven't lost it, we haven't sort of gone out of it and shown weakness. For those reasons, I still think there's a higher chance of us going at least higher to 53 before we potentially go lower again. And a lot of time what you see with these fair value gaps as well is you might put in a pretty narrow range here, and then the next week it potentially travels down, does some sort of retest on the previous week's candle before a move higher, or before a shift lower. So it could be potentially for Bitcoin specifically a pretty narrow ranged week. Don't know, it could do the opposite and we just put in another green candle to the upside as well. Still too early to tell. But for me right now, based off of last week's price action, there's still probably more reasons early this week to be bullish than bearish. Another thing we've been talking about looking and keeping a track on is the US dollar. Last week I spoke about this particular high being of great interest, and would you believe it, we probably put in a great bit of technical structure for people wanting to remain bullish in the crypto markets. So pretty hallmark move we saw with the weekly close, where we had a range of prior highs. We saw the DXY specifically venture above it, only to close the week below that low. So failure to get commitment to go higher. Usually call that a sweep or an inside range move, I guess, in this situation. So for me, this is pretty exciting. Sets up a pretty interesting prospect because we have this range that is from early 2023. We've seen a deviation to the outside on both ends. Usually the middle area is then your overall decision point, technically speaking. So for me, if we're seeing weakness on the upside here, I'm now looking for failure of this particular red candle here. Get that away so it's not too busy. I'm looking for a failure move below that now to potentially then set up the next multi-month move to the downside for the DXY, which would be basically as good a conditions get for crypto. And you know, we've had this massive rally up on the US dollar index, so you know, what goes up hopefully comes down, but we'll see how aggressive this move is, or you know, if something crazy were to happen and we maybe do somehow still get a bounce here. Like, you can't just rule anything out. Like, sometimes the TA doesn't always work, but for me the odds are stacked in the favor for at least 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 weeks of this tracking down, at least slowly, even if it were to do a bullish move as well. So I think for me, you know, the next few weeks it's still lining up from the US dollar index, a bit of debasement, so crypto assets should go higher. And I guess the main thing that's got me excited since last year as well has been this particular chart. So just to quickly cover this one, total 3, it's the total market cap of the altcoins. Basically it's everything minus Bitcoin and Ethereum. So when this is moving up, it's almost like an indicator or index that the whole crypto altcoin market is moving to the upside. So this break we had here in 2023 was pretty key. It was pretty significant just from a sentiment point of view. It was a bear market high, so getting above that, consolidating, pushing up off of it. Now we've had 2 weeks of continuous expansion, and yeah, basically a very clean close above the prior highs. So for me, that's almost like the green light I was looking for personally to start to ride this now to the next key level structure for something like this, which would be these previous weekly highs. It'd be a monthly level here as well. But this general cluster, I don't know exactly where it could stop here. You know, you could see it go further, but this is the next level of interest where I want to see what the market does. And if we start to see any sign of weakness, you know, something similar to what we saw here on the DXY, anything where we put in a high, fail to go higher, that could be a telltale sign that there might be some exhaustion on the altcoin market, and we could see, I guess, a bit of a sell-off, which would be normal. Like, we wouldn't expect this to go up forever. You know, in the long term, it does go up and to the right, but you know, you've got to expect potential pullbacks along the way. So all in all, positive momentum here, strength here until proven otherwise. If this weekly candle, just to state a bearish scenario, were to remain where it is now, that might set up enough lower time frame structure to suggest some sort of pullback back to where we came from with this breakout. So that's not an unreasonable thing to happen as well. But early in the week here today, most of my things that I'm betting on are to the upside for continuation, if I am in any short-term positions, but my long-term positions I've been building here on spot since here, and to be honest, along the way here in October and November as well. So just solidifying, I guess, my idea there that this should theoretically continue higher before it has to make its next decision. And another one I wanted to share today was the stablecoin market dominance. So this is looking at Tether, looking at the total market cap dominance that it has, and you know, looking at something like Tether here, it's a pretty convincing move that it's rolling over here. So again, TA can only do so much for you, but if we just use this even as like a sentiment check, we'll look at just general trend. You know, are we moving higher highs, higher lows, or are we starting to see lower highs, lower lows? So even from purely not, I guess, too technical of a breakdown here, just the fact that we're starting to see lower lows and lower highs here on the stablecoin market dominance chart on a high time frame like a weekly, that does suggest to me that as long as the total market cap, which is what we're looking at here, if that's continuing to the upside, but something like this is going to the downside, theoretically it's suggesting a rotation of capital into those altcoin markets as well. So, you know, just marrying all these things together, we're just getting a bit of confidence that there might be some more powder left, but it's all coming into altcoins. That's what we like to see. Also looking into what we can expect this week from the macroeconomic perspective as well. There's not a lot happening, to be honest. The biggest one I'm paying attention to is probably the FOMC meeting minutes in the US. So that comes out Thursday, 5 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So why this is important, just very briefly, we did have above expectation numbers for inflation metrics last week, so PPI and CPI. Market doesn't seem to care too much, crypto markets specifically, but there might be something in these documents that sort of reiterate that something along the lines of until the numbers come good in line to what the Fed wants to see, there won't be any interest rate cuts. And interest rate cuts are a pretty big deal in terms of, keeping momentum behind on risk markets right now. Rates coming down, money gets cheaper, there's more liquidity in the system. We've seen it in the past during the COVID cycle, all on risk assets, including stocks, crypto, it all goes to the upside. So yeah, as long as there's nothing too unknowing in these documents, we should see the markets continue. But I just want to point out that's probably the big one to watch out for coming up as well. Another one that's pretty important is the PMI, so the Purchasing Managers Index. It's essentially like a survey of manufacturing and services industries. Sounds boring, but it's essentially the closest you'll get to a real-time sentiment check on the ground for just the state of the economy in the US as well. So, if this is above 50, generally describes expansion, under 50, contraction. So anything above 50 is generally bullish, and we could just see a more positive sentiment flow across the markets, essentially is all that is. But I think the bigger one is more so the FOMC this week. So we'll see how that sort of lands first. And the other thing that's important right now, just throwing lots of positivity behind the crypto market right now, is the Bitcoin ETF flows. So we're still seeing that being mostly buying. 16th of Feb was, not a bad day for the markets, is what we have as the last recorded date. We've got some bank holidays in the US at the moment, so there isn't any trading happening. So whether or not we open up first day of the week in the US and there's double the amount of buying, that's only going to throw more and more positive sentiment behind the market. I don't know if it's going to happen, but it's just something you can speculate right now. So this will be a very, very interesting development just overnight. So we'll see how that goes. But I'll also be looking for personally as well any sort of slowing down or changes in signatures on buying and selling behaviors. That'll be potentially something to sort of wait to see the cracks start to show if something's sort of coming to an end in terms of trend. And another thing I want to sort of point out too as well during these times of uncertainty, or if you're not sure where the market's going, things like open interest can be quite handy to look at. So this is looking at how many long and short positions are opened or matched in the crypto markets right now. Roughly we're sitting at an open interest level similar to the highs that we saw during the last market cycle high, so 2021. But notably, price isn't quite as high as it was back then as well. So the only really thing I'd take away from this in terms of any insights is we're essentially just sitting at a point in the market where everyone is as exposed as they were back in 2021 before the market crashed. And whether or not that overexposure results in potential cascades or liquidations that we've seen in the past, like this period here, the end of December, everyone might remember that. Market got a bit too overheated, very frothy. We saw a bit of a cool off there. In my opinion, this initial washout we saw was probably the one that we were all probably waiting to see. And this next move, I wouldn't be surprised if we move higher, set a new level for open interest before we get some sort of second washout or cool off again. You'll sort of see with open interest, it's very normal for it to go up and down, up and down. But this is also just another way to sort of visualize as well when the market's getting a little bit too hot. I know it might look busy, but very much simply put, this is looking at funding rates for the different altcoins and crypto coins, I should just say, across perpetual exchanges. Very plainly, when it's yellow, there's higher interest rates being charged because there's more open long positions than short. So basically, a lot of people borrow to the hilt, just keeping positions open. Usually when there's too much leverage in the system, it's just natural for it to whip and liquidate and just rebalance everything. So again, that's that December period where we saw nothing but I guess a lot of positive movements in the market. Everyone was just going long, 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 adding to longs likely, and then we saw just a reset and a flush of those levels. In case you're wondering, these darker patches are negative funding rates, so they're assets that have been shorted more than they've been longed. What's interesting, if you do want to go and look at it, TIA through this period, lots of short squeezes, a lot of people expecting lower and it didn't go lower. So, it's also can sort of be a bit telling as well as to what might be something that you could look to fade if you really wanted to. But yeah, I guess what's interesting here is there is a bit of frothiness opening up, but as long as the spot buying continues, with things like the Bitcoin ETF, net exchanges moving away off exchanges. I think we saw a spike in that as well. Those are key things that sort of lead to tell the story that there's still underlying assets being purchased, and it's not just all paper derivatives that don't naturally move the market inherently being shifted. So that'll be a key one as well. So something to be of concern, but maybe not something to really just think, oh, the end is close. There might be a smaller move to the downside just to reset this like we have seen in the past, but how far away that is, who knows. But I think, like I said, I think it comes down to like things like the ETF flows, just net exchange movements of assets, just to sort of help, I guess, sort of see where that one's going. Now I thought we'd finish up with some altcoins, because that's where all the fun is. So let's just map out, I guess, a few scenarios from here. I think from Bitcoin, just to start with, it's pretty simple. This week, I would just be wanting to make sure, watch that let's just start with a fresh chart. For me, I'd just be wanting to see on a lower time frame chart that we don't lose any key market structure. I think that's really important now. We just want to see persistent highs moving higher and lows going higher lows. So if I'm looking at the range on Bitcoin right now that I'm observing, we've got a deviation to the downside. I'd be expecting probably something to the upside, and then I'd want to see probably the middle of the range hold. It wouldn't be unreasonable to see Bitcoin come back potentially a little bit lower. It is probably going sideways up here. Hopefully it can hang there, but if it doesn't, I wouldn't be surprised if we do see a pullback a little bit deeper here into this little pocket here. So that's the golden pocket on a Fibonacci chart. Sorry, the Fibonacci indicator. If I had to sort of liken to what other instance we had of that, it was just here when we were sort of playing here in the sand. Oops. If you were to take a low there to a high there, you can see that this golden pocket was respected. Good amount of accumulation and a move higher. These moves here, where we get big expansive candles, they tend to leave, I guess, the candles of inefficiency. So you do see price often return to it. So we have had it come back once, but I do wonder if we come back a second time before we can then take off again. So that it's a fade or a move to the downside like this that could potentially hurt altcoins during this week. And if that does happen, and Bitcoin does recover, I'd expect altcoins to recover as well. I mean, when you look at a chart like this one where I showed previously, I mean, these are weekly candles. So something like this won't really show up as much of more than a blip on a chart like this. So I still think the macro trend is trending upwards, but just calling out there could be some short-term downsides during the week, which is normal. Ethereum's been obviously a great one to watch lately. There's probably still the same setup that we spoke about last time still running on Ethereum. So if we look at just running a Fibonacci from the top of the cycle to the bottom, so from there to there, we've just crossed 50%. So that's a key level in itself, but here if we just continue to see higher highs, higher lows, accumulation, my next target is up here, 3345. Obviously I'll just check to see if there's any monthly level hanging about that level here. No, not really. Yeah, pretty clear sailing. Let's just go weekly. Yeah, I mean, the only thing that's a call of concern that might be a level people are looking to take profit at is there on a weekly level, but I mean, that lines up pretty nicely with the 618 as well. So pretty pragmatic area, I think, for a fair few traders, investors to be looking at as an area of interest. So we'll see what happens when price does approach this level, but for now it looks like until anything else changes, the trend is to the upside here. Again, like looking at something like Fibonacci, we have seen only a very shallow move to the downside here. But what I would say is we have seen previous lows swept, so that might be enough to indicate that there has been some accumulation here. So we'll see if the market likes it and it wants to push higher here, or if this is what might be considered a double top and we start to see just it roll over one more time before it reaccumulates and then comes up again. So we'll see with this one as well throughout the week. I think if Bitcoin has to kind of lead the way with this one to see how it goes. Another one I think most people aren't really thinking about right now, MATIC. It's been pretty quiet. pretty boring. It kind of tends to do it, that to be honest. It's not the most exciting asset, historically speaking either. But if we look at it on a pretty high time frame, it's at an interesting juncture. We have this, I guess you could call resistance level that's just broken last week. So I would anticipate that if this were to continue, it could set up some sort of structure to make its next leg higher. And we have found with MATIC too, it tends to, I guess in the past at least, range for about 595 days before it broke higher. It's currently been going sideways for 1,000 days. So take that what you will, but other than just the fact that it has had a solid period of time of just moving sideways, it might be time for it to pop. I mean, that's essentially it. So there's still a few key levels that you need to see for it to take out before it were to move higher. These previous highs are of significance for me. So that's what I'd be looking at to see once we clear those. It's probably setting new highs. So that could take months, honestly, to play out. This isn't really a trend that's probably going to happen in the next couple of days or anything, but I just want to sort of point out, if MATIC hasn't been on the radar for a lot of people, may now be the time to, I guess, look at it, because they're still making partnerships. They are still building. Lots of people using their tech, and they're going down the road of ZK rollups as well, which has been very much a hot and heavy theme through the bear market. So yeah, we'll see what happens there. But even if I draw a channel here using the current low, looking at the next subsequent high low and the high in between, so using those 3 points as a reference, this is kind of a trend channel that's playing out. So I can see that the market's respected specifically this period here where it did throw out, it did reclaim, and then we've had a pretty clean retest as well. So for me, areas of interest, this mid-range here and then top of the range here. That's like another way to draw out this one as well. That might be a bit easier to track. So that's an interesting one as well, MATIC at the moment. Stacks has been just strength to strength. We talked about this one last week. It's kind of now hitting the top end of this range channel. So for me, that means it's the next decision point, really. Potentially a good place to take profits. But if you're holding this long term, I mean, there's lots of, I guess, bullish tailwinds behind building on Bitcoin. And yeah, Stacks is all about being a layer 2 infrastructure on Bitcoin. So been a top performer the last couple of weeks, but we haven't really seen a pullback on it, to be honest, as well. So it'll be interesting to see if potentially now we do start to see a pullback, especially if Bitcoin does start to show any weakness. But with that being said, the way things get when they get bullish, it's really hard to say. But yeah, it's a bit hard to potentially jump on this if you haven't already, as it does seem a bit more difficult. But I mean, if we're just jumping in on lower time frames and not seeing any weakness personally, but again, this is a 4-hour time frame. A lot can change during the course of the week, but I think I'll be following this one pretty closely, just because it has been a top performer. Another one that's been showing up on the radar this week has been Altcoin. This is one I jumped on early, thankfully, but I guess what's the most appealing about this is it is a last cycle coin, but there's enough narratives behind it, and it has performed in the past that a lot of people, I guess, are speculating it has the potential to move back to the upside again. And there's a couple ways to analyze this. Like if we draw a Fibonacci from the top to the bottom, that's a common way for traders or investors to view the market. Even at the first Fibonacci target, it's still $58. So from even today's market price, that's a 6x move. If you're looking at it at a couple of other ways to measure it, you can move to the mid-range as well, which is the next usual key decision point. That's a 14x as well. So I think a lot of speculators are sort of jumping in this one as, I guess, hopefully a play to the upside there if the market momentum keeps up. But being somewhat of a relative mid-cap as opposed to a low cap, it really didn't have a good time during the bear market, but we've seen significant accumulation, I would say, in recent times. Specifically with this move under, we were able to put in a high, and then again, we're looking at very shortly putting in a high above this high. So that again is a good sign of accumulation in the way that I view the markets. So any inability to probably get over this level in a meaningful way may set up some sort of bearish structure for another move leg down. But just following the way the current market is moving and momentum, I sort of would be expecting this to continue. And we've had 2 consecutive weeks again here of positive price movement, and this week alone, already up 25%. So there's only really this key high here and this key high here before it starts to move into some sort of, I guess you could say, period of less resistance up to this area. So it's one I'm watching quite closely. And again, like another way you can chart out something like Altcoin is to jump on a line chart just to clean up the way it looks, remove any tails, which can be a bit exaggerated depending on the exchange you're looking at, etc. But closes tend to be quite a good way to view the market, and that's what you're able to do with the line chart. Take the cycle low, take the next subsequent high low that was produced, and then from there we hit the high in between like we do normally. And again, you can see here quite a bit of accumulation through that phase, a new higher high, so that's a bullish sentiment mark for me. And now we're just getting over this mid-range here. Again, if we were bearish, I would argue that we would have put in a lower low here and then tracked lower. That's kind of how I read things. So the next key decision point, if you're looking at channel analysis like this, would be up here, which kind of reads into potentially looking to move into this region as well. So there's a lot of, I guess, technical setups here for me that I quite like the look of, and that's kind of my thoughts on Altcoin at the moment. Another one I know it's been of interest on a lot of people's lips is Beam. It's kind of just gone, hasn't it? It's really hard to probably catch at this stage, but I mean, it's assets like this that are still quite exciting. New narratives. It's an altcoin that's basically been rebranded, to be honest. I think it was Merit Circle in the past. But you know, when you're looking at Beam on a USDT valuation or even a BTC valuation, oh, that can't be right. Beam USDT. Let's try this. Oops. Yeah, so it's still showing strength against Bitcoin, and it's also about to put in new all-time highs really soon, by the look of it. So let's just look at that. A bit of a dirty wick here. I wonder if that's just that exchange. Let's have a look at another one. Let's look at Gate. That can't be the right asset. Okay, let's just stick to that because that's what we got. Yeah, we can jump in on a lower time frame and see what we can make of this one. Yeah, good range of consolidation here. Pretty clean breakout, just no real selling by the looks of it. Had that accumulation here, reaccumulation. Put in higher highs already. Put a pretty good retest of the previous high just there. Yeah, from here, it's really hard to say where you could potentially look for a re-entry on something like this. You potentially would look for on a daily time frame, if you're not DCAing into something like this, some sort of move like this where you do get a sweep that results in a bit of a retrace. It might let you scoop it back up at some previous lows like you were able to there. But yeah, I mean, if you're also looking at this as a flag, this could potentially just be the flagpole. What you can do is like copy and paste that and look to just measure move that move like that. So you can be conservative and take it from there as well, about halfway. So I mean, that's a pretty considerable move, just looking at the previous structure and viewing this as a flagpole with a measured move. So you may not see this one potentially come back easily for a nice gentleman's entry. So just to point that out too, sometimes DCA is just your friend when trends are getting away from you like this. But that's all I got today. There's always time for more altcoin analysis in the future. So if there's anything that you're liking the look of or want a second opinion on, feel free to leave a comment below and we can touch on it next episode. But from me, that's all today. And let's hope this altcoin rally has got some legs and we still just keep seeing some green candles. Thanks very much. Catch you next time.